Okay, so I'm back in New York, and I just finished chapter 3, which was called Wayfinding, and did the activities as well. So, kind of just as a summary, the concepts in chapter 3 and the activities they want you to do is basically to look at what you do in your life on a regular basis, what activities you do, and rate them on two scales. One is your level of engagement while you're doing them, and the second is your energy levels once you're done doing them. And technically, what you're supposed to do is log it for like 2 to 3 weeks every day, and so it's fresh in your mind. And then at the end of each week, like look for patterns and see what you learned. But since I'm not currently working, it doesn't really make as much sense to do that because I'm not really doing the activities every day that I usually do. So instead, what I did was I actually did two things. The first thing they recommended in this case was looking at back over like the peaks of your past experiences, and do the same assessment for those. So kind of like what are some of the things that you enjoyed the most or the least, or that just stand out in your memory as peaks or pits, and do the engagement and energy analysis on those. So I did that. And then I also did, since I just stopped working recently, I kind of tried to do like a week in the life and did the analysis on some of the activities I did the most in my day-to-day job. I don't think that's I probably like was skewed when I was doing it, only remembering like the best things and glorifying things, but I tried to be honest. But I basically did both of those things and then have some learnings from that I think kind of like have stood out so far. So first, I think doing the activity overall was super helpful. I think like for me, I think about this stuff all the time, but the act of actually writing it out is much more helpful and brings more clarity. So I think just the act of going through, writing it down, and really trying to see the patterns there is worth it. Even if you think you've already done this before or you've thought about it before, I would encourage you to just physically write it out and try it again. The main thing I took away from doing that was they had this idea of, for everything as you're trying to learn from it, use AEIOU. So A is about like what activity were you doing, and try to understand, did the activity itself bring you energy or not bring you energy? Or for E, maybe it was the environment. So don't just say, oh, that was good, I liked that, but then try to use the AEIOU model to figure out why. What did you like about it? What about it brought you energy? What about it didn't? And for me specifically, what I learned is that the environment matters so much to me, more to me than I realized. So I realized that if I'm not in an energetic and like people-driven environment, then I can become super introverted, and like then I don't energize myself. And it's good for me to get pockets of that, but full-time like quiet and like just like certain environments aren't good for me, which I never really thought about before because also I am kind of an introvert, so that somewhat surprised me, but it was a pattern. And so I think breaking down AEIOU was super, super helpful. And the other thing that I learned, which also surprised me, was the job I just left and the job I've been doing for the last like 7 or 8 or 9 years, I actually really enjoy most of the activities. Like when I rated them on an engagement and an energy score, most of them actually scored really high. So I think it might be things more like environment or like mission or certain things actually outside of the activity that might be missing. So this was really helpful because I think when you're in times of change or like times where you're kind of feeling stressed about, oh my gosh, what should I do? It's really easy to go to extremes, to be like, okay, I'm not going to do product anymore. I'm going to move to Italy. I'm going to learn how to make pasta with grandma, and I'm going to be so happy, and like just go totally different edge of the spectrum. But I think from actually forcing myself to do the analysis, the fact that I get energy and am highly engaged in so many of the tasks, maybe I don't need to make such an extreme change. It's more just tweaking some of the things in the environment, maybe in the mission, maybe in a few other things. And that was like just a funny realization that, oh, Sarah, you've kind of been in your head telling yourself a story that might not actually be true based on the facts. And the last thing I realized is also I've been putting so much pressure to get all of my fulfillment and my like joyful life from one thing. So like all from my full-time job. But actually when I went through my peaks and did that whole exercise of just looking back on my whole life, a lot of the things I love came from things that I supplement on top of my job. So like this other part-time job that I do, or cooking. I love to cook as a hobby. And so rather than thinking about just kind of like back to a topic from an earlier chapter, which is like engineering a problem or engineering a solution rather than designing a solution, rather than me saying, I just need to get a new job, I really need to think about my life as a whole. How can I design my life as a whole? Some of the things that bring me energy and I'm highly engaged with will come from my full-time job, but it's okay if some of the things don't. And I think having the freedom to think of my life as a whole rather than just my job needs to give me everything will probably lead me to actually finding a job that will have more things. Those are the main things I learned thinking about the environment and using the AEIOU model, thinking about actually using the exercise to break down what are you really thinking, like what is the facts telling you rather than a story you're telling yourself in your mind. And because I think the story in your mind also can so easily include other people's perspectives, and you don't think it does, but you hear so many people's opinions, it's easy to just turn them into your own. But when you write it down, like those are the facts, and you can find more truth in there. And then last thing is just thinking about design. This is designing my life. It's not just designing what I do for work and get paid to do. And so 2 things I'm going to do from here. I am going to move on to the next chapter and keep going, but I also am going to try to I'm not going to try. I am going to do it. I'm going to continue to do the wayfinding exercise for the next couple of weeks. Even though I'm not working, there are some things that I'm trying to do in my free time, like write, like actually do this book. I'm helping on some side projects for some friends, and so I think it is worth actually keeping the activity log for a couple of weeks just to see if there's anything new I learned, but I'm not going to have that hold me up from going on to the next chapters. So let's see what chapter 4 has in store.